May 19th, 2025 Education Operations Committee meeting to order. And on the very first agenda item that we have, Dr. Phelps, take the show. Take the show. And welcome, thank you for being here.
All right, thanks for having us tonight. We are Horace Mann, and this is part of our Horace Mann Student Lighthouse team. And just to give you some background on how these students got here today, they either themselves filled out an application and self-applied for it, or a teacher recommended them as part of the Student Lighthouse team. Not only that, this team of about 20 students this year really took it upon themselves to come up with what they wanted to do in school, and then from there they just took over with everything. It was a real student-driven team. So, without further ado, we will do some introductions.
Hi, I'm Dominic Tao, 8th grade, and I was nominated in 6th grade, and from there I signed up for the Lighthouse every other year.
Hello, I'm Caden Peterson, and I decided to sign up this year to try to make our school a better place.
Hello, I'm Erin Whetstone, and I was nominated by teachers at Horace Mann.
And I will be playing the role of Addie, an 8th grader, who is at a track meet right now. All right, so we're just going to take a quick look at some of our accomplishments from this year, including school assemblies, kindness campaign, survivor, and some other areas. So I will turn it over to Caden for school assemblies.
Hello, I'm Caden Peterson, and I'll be talking about our school assemblies. So for the first Friday of each month, we create one portion of the Student Lighthouse team creates the assembly, and in the assembly we ask the Rock and Eagles band to play awesome music. We go over the announcements and we do some acknowledgments, attendance updates. We also do games like Minute to Win It, Simon Says, and many more. We also do trivia to see how much our students know, and then we do Who's That Eagle, because we're trying to figure out who our mascot is.
The kindness campaign went from February 7th to the 28th. It was about how the students were to be kinder to each other, to earn more respect for each other, and work together. The campaign, it helped the students come together and be more respectful to each other, and it helped to raise awareness about what happens in the school.
And then on April 22nd, we celebrated our students by doing the board exam, by doing a survivor challenge. We did many different activities, Lego building, and guessing which teacher, bingo, and many more activities.
All right, and this group did so much more. These were probably our highlights. As we look forward to next year, the group feels they want to continue our monthly school assemblies with them leading the way, including getting the presentations together. They want to continue a kindness campaign. And one area that they'd like to improve on or work on is working on our Leader in Me lessons or our social emotional lessons during that advisory time and getting in front of students more. So, at this point, we will take questions, or I should say, these three will take questions, if anyone has any.
Any comments from the board?
Yeah, all you talked about making school a better place and improving different things through kindness. What kind of improvements do you think you made, or what changes you affected?
I think what really changed is the effort our students tried to put in for a better goal. And I feel like our school has been made with the posters and stuff a more safe place for our students and more of a sense of connection, like a second family in our school.
Thanks. Other comments? I'll make a comment, and then I'll pass it over to you. You have, Dr. Phelps, a very mature group here. When they first walked in, I thought they were sophomores or juniors in high school, and I thought we had middle school students coming. So, very mature group, very well spoken. I appreciate what you're doing and what you're thinking about doing, what you had done. Now you're getting ready for the high school. So, I wish you all the best as you move forward. Well done.
Couple seventh graders here, so we still got them.
You guys had the Who's the Eagle, and I got to be at one of the presentations where there were some students guessing it. Is there an unveiling date for the Eagle?
The eagle is actually unveiled in this last presentation.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
It was Mr. G.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time with the whole group, and thank you for bringing all those things to us to let us see what's going on at Forest Man. Thank you. And then right into business here. I'm seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the April 28th, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. At this time, do we have any speakers? We do not. We're going to move on past agenda item 4 and move on to agenda item number 5. The employee handbook updates for 2025-26 school year will be presented to the board for review and approval. And who is going to do that?
Yeah, that's all.
There we go.
I forgot my pen. Good evening. A copy of the employee handbook suggested edits was attached to the agenda for everybody's. Oh, I hit it. It didn't go on. Sorry. A copy of the handbook was attached to the agenda. If you had a chance to scroll through it, you would see that almost all of the changes really are more housekeeping in nature. We updated our dates. We updated staff contact names, building lists, obviously took out the buildings that will be closing, updated the calendar link. We had a couple of things that just needed to get consistent in the handbook. One of those things was earlier in the year, we went through a DPI civil rights compliance process as required by them periodically, and they suggested a couple of tweaks to our non-discrimination statement. We implemented those changes on the website and other places that we could immediately do, and it was understood when I talked with them that we would update it on the handbook at the next update. So that's that update that you see there. The biggest thing was adding Title II into the verbiage. Otherwise, everything else in that statement comes from WASB as a kind of blanket standard notice. And I did let them know that they asked for Title II to be added so that WASB could consider that going forward. Leave of absence in the handbook had two different references. One said principals could approve up to 3 days. The other area it said principals could approve up to 5. Up to 5 is how it has been administered since prior to my coming here. So I just made sure that the reference that still was reflecting 3 was updated accordingly. There was some years of service language that had an old reference to printing a list each year of the number of years of experience that people had. That was a throwback to when we had union seniority lists. And so I eliminated that sentence because we have not produced those lists in quite some time. We had a couple of other clarifications with regard to things like how do insurance payments work when you're on long-term disability but still on paid sick leave, those sorts of things. And so questions like that came up through the year, and we realized the language wasn't quite on par with how it was happening. So we updated those, very few. The one that I would say is probably substantive, but it's really filling in a missing link, is the teacher retirement benefit From years ago, those of you who've been on the board longer will remember that there was a provision that was spelled out when there was a change made in 2011. And so teachers that were hired prior to January 1st of 2011 had one benefit, and they were essentially like grandfathered into that benefit. So that language is in there. There was a new section added at the time that addressed those teachers hired January 1st, 2011 and beyond, and it changed the type of benefit that they receive. All of that is staying the same. What we realized last year, based on a question that came from a teacher, is that nowhere in the handbook did anybody identify if I'm a married couple both working in the school district and one of us was hired prior to 2011 and one was hired after 2011, how does that work? We have 7 of those said couples in the district. And so we did work with the WEA just to kind of talk about what they remember the intent being. We looked at it administratively. We had some conversation in the business office involving Noel Tordsman as well, because he's been part of that process all the way along. And so there's a brief little bit of language that we added in there to spell out that in those particular situations, what happens depending upon which spouse retires first. Essentially, we're just trying to make sure that we're defaulting so that they get the best possible combination of options for them while honoring the prior language that was in place for both of those timeframes. So while it is new language, it's really just filling in a gap and clarifying how we will administer those for those 7 families that it will apply to. And I'm not anticipating that we'll have more families that would become eligible for that. I suppose there's always a possibility that we have a prior to 2011 teacher here that we ultimately hire their spouse for something. But at this point in time, it's just those 7. So 14 people, I guess, if I multiply. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
At this point in time about that terminology?
Not about the retirement. I have a question about something else. I was wondering why we don't have a clause in our contracts about reporting when someone has a police contact.
That's in board policy.
But why isn't it in the handbook?
Because we don't have every single policy in the handbook.
Mm-hmm.
It is in the board policies, though, that all staff are provided access and copies to during orientation.
Okay,
So-
it's just something that I think is really important. And
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've had a couple of situations where staff have done that according to the board policy. So I know it's working, at least based on the couple examples that I've been involved with.
We
So-
have one example that didn't work.
Oh, okay.
Which sort of created the need for the policy, I remember,
Ah,
not so fondly.
Good to have a little bit of history
mhm.
as we talk about this. And I agree with you, Gene, and as we move forward, maybe that's a discussion point that comes up again. Because everything seems to be changing statewide in a lot of different areas when it comes to personnel.
I could certainly add that into the annual vector training that staff have to have. When we send out the new handbook through Vector, every staff member gets that as a mandatory training item. And we also highlight certain policies for their review, like social media use is in that group. I could certainly add that into a list of policies just to make sure that we cover that, and it's an annual reminder to folks. So that would be a very easy switch on our end. It doesn't involve any bigger process. So.
Good discussion point. Any other questions at this point? Otherwise, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the recommended changes to the 2025-2026 employee handbook language.
So moved.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And I think you're probably taking on the next one
I am, along with my trusted colleague, Josh.
Let me just read this off. So
Sure.
everybody knows what is going on. Administration will bring forward a recommendation for wage salary increases for the 2025-26 school year for non-teaching staff employee groups. Teacher increases will be addressed at a later meeting following the negotiation process with the WEA. Great, go ahead.
So, in keeping with the process that we've used in the past, based on the discussions we've had for budget, we did put 1.5% increases into the budget planning process. So we would bring forward tonight to you a recommendation to increase our non-teaching staff by that 1.5%. The clarification I would add with why teachers are excluded from the action at this time is we do have to go through a collective bargaining process with WEA as required by the state. We are working to get dates identified for that, so those of you on the WEA negotiating team will be hearing from us in terms of a committee connection. But that will come forward to you at a later date once that process has been completed. So that is our recommendation for your discussion.
Questions from the board? If not, I'm going to seek a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the recommended wage and salary increase for non-teaching staff groups as presented. Any further questions? With hesitation, I thought there might be some other questions. Not?
Obviously, there's still things we're trying to figure out with the budget as a whole. Is this a set in stone number, or is this something that we would have some option to play with
That's a great question. That's a great question. This is a committee action, so your action tonight would forward it to the June 9th board meeting for final action at the regular meeting. We assumed we'd be going through that as a two-step process. I will say that due to the number of 12-month staff that we have in the district, custodial, administration, municipal, some of our AES staff members, we do need those pieces of information before the next cycle that you would take action on to avoid having to do back pay. So we certainly can do back pay. We've done it in the past. We tried to avoid that if at all possible, just because of the volume of extra work it adds. So that would be our timing. Tonight's action was brought forward with that timing in mind so that payroll can get everything that they need to avoid the back pay process.
So I can't speak to anybody else's hesitation, but my hesitation is this is a heartbreaking thing. This is hard. And we knew this was coming. And this is, in a lot of ways, a direct result to the fact that we don't have the funds from the referendum. I won't be here on June 9th. I'll be out of the country, so I'll just take this moment to say really disappointing, but I understand that this is what we need to do. So.
You mentioned is it set in stone, and that you were hoping to at some point get some good news. So if something changed, and all of a sudden, all the politicians came together and changed the funding.
An 80% special education.
Yeah, it could be changed later to add additional funds. What would be, and then there would be back pay, and it would be a bit of a problem, but it could happen. What would be much harder would be to go backwards.
Yeah.
Correct.
Because you're having employees sign contracts, count on what's, and even our employees that aren't contracted still, they're
absolutely.
committing to it. So, so it is sort of final, but with that caveat.
If I'm not mistaken, I think we've gone through that process before, where we have come back and revisited
Yep.
and given a little bit more if we could at that time. So this is, remember, the first step, and it's
a meeting that goes to the regular board at the following meeting. So maybe something does change.
Thank you.
Corey, did you?
Well, my comment is the fact that what was presented previously is well thought out, and I've had, suggestions and concerns and asking questions about realigning those other positions that you had proposed before that look like cuts, but they're really just moving people around. But I was asking about how that's going to impact the students. And so, to approve this now without necessarily having more answers on how it affects the students down the road potentially. Mainly, I had brought up about the math and English interventionists or those types of helpers, so to, in theory, improve our testing scores, right, and improve the students' abilities. So to approve it now seems to be ahead. I understand with the contracts and the fact that July is our start over time with contracts. But yes, going backwards, Lance, would be tough. Going forward is easy if positive things take place. I know you're analyzing things constantly and how to make sure the students aren't affected or affected as little as possible. And I have no doubt and complete confidence in you that you are doing that. I'm just questioning about doing it before we have more answers. That's all. Which I think you're very understanding about as well. So.
Any other? Continue to look at it, as I know you will, and as we move forward. So with that, at this point in time, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 7. Neola has brought forward a new policy, 5411, third grade promotion and retention at-risk students in conjunction with the Act 20 legislation. We are bringing this policy to the board as presented for the approval for state statute requirement by July 1st, 2025, to go into effect September 1st, 2027. Policy 5410, retention, is an active policy that we are suggesting revisions to in order to align with Neola language in more clearly defining our practices around retention, placement, and fourth grade promotion guidelines. So with that, who is, there we go. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Wendy and I are going to share with you just a little bit of background around Policy 5411 and Policy 5410. I'm going to start with the new Policy 5411, which is related to Act 20 legislation. And this policy, as Mr. Boucher laid out, needs to be approved by July 1, but takes effect in September of 2027. And the rationale and the context behind that is that the state recognizes that instructional elements that are related to Act 20 require time for our current kindergarten students to engage in high-quality science of reading instruction integrated into our DPI-approved district resources. And therefore, Policy 5411 is around exit criteria from a reading plan in third grade. This allows that time for those students to engage in that instruction prior to when the state is expecting that it goes into effect. So it's an interesting twist on a policy that needs to be approved due to state statute by July 1, but takes effect in September of 2027. And just a little added information, once it's active in that 27-28 school year, then there are other provisions that fall into place, such as students who may not graduate from their reading plan that is part of the Act 20 legislation. a couple of things fall into play. That we need to be engaged in intensive summer reading programs, yet to be defined by the DPI. They are still working on what qualifies as an intensive supportive summer reading program, because as you know, we currently have a rigorous and robust summer school program, so it's not that we don't have one in place, but the exact requirements are still being identified. And that we would also need to have in place some additional supports for fourth grade students who maybe would not score proficient on the third grade forward test, as well as may not graduate or meet the exit criteria for their reading plan. And just to be rest assured, we currently have our EMLSS framework which in place, which already identifies students in grades K through 12 who have challenges, but specifically at the elementary level. We are already currently applying supports and interventions and pathways for our fourth and fifth grade students, as well as our K through third grade students. So we would simply be continuing with practices that we already have, intensifying those based on what the current policy is asking for in terms of support for fourth grade students. And, you know, that a strong and comprehensive EMLSS system for our K-5 students is what helps create that consistency in meeting those targeted needs and lagging skills. So that wouldn't be new to us here in the Wausau School District in terms of when that goes into effect, because we currently are supporting our fourth grade students in that way. So any questions about the new policy 5411 before we move into 5410?
So comment and question.
Sure.
Comment first, which is I appreciate that they understand that we need a few years to put things in place. So whoever thought that up, good job. My question comes into the determination criteria, specifically that a student will be promoted if the district recommends retention, but the parents disagree. Obviously, parental input is hugely important, but if the district is making the decision to recommend retention, there are obviously substantial reasons beyond that. So under this policy, what sort of processes or systems are going to be put in place to support that family, to educate that family, and do what's best for that student?
Good question. That kind of flows into 5410 in some of those spaces too. I don't know. Do you want me to go? Do you want?
I can take it, Julie.
Yeah, sure. You mean?
So we would involve the parents at every step. When you look at 5410, which is a little more in-depth than our previous retention policy, which just covered retention. This one covers promotion, placement, and retention. The parents are identified as a part of that intervention team or that student team. So when those conversations are taking place early on, they would be around the table with the school staff, looking at the student's progress, looking at all the different features that make that student appropriate for that grade level. And our hope is that they would be kind of brought along with that information. And looking at that promotion, placement, and retention, one of the pieces that it includes, and I think a better definition of, are just that placement, promotion, and retention, what that means, why we would consider it, why we wouldn't consider it. And I think it just provides more defined opportunities for us to work through those questions with our families, our students, and our staff.
Yeah. We currently don't, we have many, if at all, staff initiated or recommended retentions as a practice due to some of the research and all of the elements around the complexities of retention on a student. But if that were to be the case, we could apply the same things that Wendy was mentioning that would be part of that placement, retention, and promotion pieces that fall into place under 5410 as well.
Thank you.
Good question. Solution.
The personal reading plan, is this expected to get all children to proficiency by the time they get done with third grade? And if so, how? I mean, we're going to have to buy bigger desks because we're going to have kids that, because public schools take every child that cannot reach proficiency.
Sure.
The way that our EMLSS systems of support work now, in terms of pathways to support kids with some writing skills, we are obviously utilizing some of our new knowledge with the Cox Campus training that teachers are utilizing with some of our science-based, or science of reading instructional tools. We've got new core resources that really hit on the rigor of the standards. So I think all of those things, along with our highly qualified teachers and the knowledge that they bring to the table and the expertise that they'll also gain from training, will certainly all support the hope that our students are reading proficiently by third grade. But as we know, even in our current system, we still have students with lagging skills. So the good part about the way that the policy reads is there are other elements we can take into consideration to continue that support through fourth grade that don't put just a stop clause on either scoring proficient on the forward test and or the exit criteria that the state has laid out for removal from the reading plan. And I think that will be in flux as we go through this too. This is a new policy with what that exit criteria looks like and sounds like. And I'm sure we will see more of that happening as we gather all of that data that the state is collecting on the number of reading plans, the number of exits. I'm sure we'll see a little ebb and flow with this over time, but we will continue to support kids no matter where they're at. And the policy does allow us to do that with some elements that are laid out in the Neola 5411.
Because back when Dr. Williams was here, it was a Republican plan that all kids had to pass proficiently or be held back, and Dr. Williams did some really great work and convinced Governor Walker that that wasn't possible. And this just seems like it's another run at that. It's pie in the sky, trying to make us look bad. Yes, it's good, but
Grade level curriculum is really important, and we've got really skilled teachers who I think are going to continue to support kids in the very best way possible. But we still will have kids with lagging skills for a variety of reasons.
and we know how detrimental it is to kids' psyche to get held back. And sometimes they just pick it up the next year with a little extra help. So I have all confidence in our teachers. I just know that we have students of many different abilities.
Good questions. Any other questions? Not? I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the proposed changes to Policy 5410 and Policy 5411.
So moved.
Seconded.
Did you make comments on the second policy?
Wendy was prepared
I
to
can go
share
through
them,
it.
but if you don't have any questions, we certainly don't need to go through it.
Well, we kind
Well,
of,
this is
Julie
the time to
passed it
ask.
over, and then
I
we
kinda
talked
tossed it
about
over,
it
yes.
in relation to retention.
They're
but-
integrated, but slightly different.
You
They're-
want to move this slide
Let's bring
forward
it back to
one.
order, in
Yep.
the fact that,
So-
just a minute, let's
Well,
bring it back to
this
order.
transition that lost all of us, right?
Got you going there. Bringing it back to order, and the fact is that the motion's now on the table, but we do have questions at this point that can be followed up on. So if you have any questions,
Well, that's my question, you know, based upon what we just said, is there something from the other one you need to point out to us now that is important based upon what Jane and Sarah were questioning you on, I guess?
About the are you thinking the retention
5410.
piece or just
Yeah.
5410? So this is, we previously had a 5410 that only covered retention. So this came along with the Neola update for the Act 20 pieces, and it really provides more clearly defined roles and what the differences are between placement, promotion, and retention.
Okay.
And then provides schools some guidelines on what that support looks like, what those teams look like, and what that process looks like. So
Okay. Good.
that's kind of that slide in a nutshell. We did not take the end piece for the middle school, high school level, only because we have our credits and course completion to help guide us through those graduation pieces and our definitions of at-risk learners. So we didn't take the
that's a different system
that,
in itself.
right. Well, I'm thinking of the administrative guidelines, but we're working on those pieces as we move through, but it lines up pretty well with this policy.
Okay, any follow-up questions?
It just would be nice if we were properly funded so that we could hire enough staff to meet all the goals that they set for us.
Sarah,
Good follow-up, Ms. Rush. It's a good follow-up. All right, with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll be talking about this again in the future. Thank you. All right, agenda item number 8. Assistant Superintendent Joshua Good is presenting a summary report presenting all legal counsel expenses incurred during the third quarter of 2024-2025. The report is broken down by law firm and by type of legal advice sought. This is a written report that requires no action, but we look forward to your comments.
Thank you. Not much to comment on with this quarter, this last quarter, about $13,000 worth of legal expenses. For year-to-date total, my eyes are getting worse, about $24,000. This is against an overall budget for legal expenses of $95,000. So we're trending significantly under that and well under where we were this time last year. So if there are any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
No specific questions from me, but a comment that I did pick up on, the fact that we have a lot of room. And that was nice to see that, we did not have to spend the amount on legal fees as we have in the past.
Yep.
And let's not try to spend it in the last quarter. But just
Thank you very much for that follow-up.
But a comment on this, just because it relates to other issues. If anybody wonders how do we get a fund balance that is higher than what we need, it's because we budget for things, and sometimes the things go under. And so, if you're $10,000 under every single year on it, eventually you adjust it down, which we actually have, because this used to be higher than 95. It was 100 and maybe 100, 108,
something like that.
But until that happens, each year you're putting more money into the fund balance. So that's how the fund balance grows, is when things happen that you get through the year a little bit less than you planned for.
And a good point to be made, because of the fact if we can save money in that area, we can then increase our fund balance. Going back to what Ms. Rush said several years ago, there was a problem with the fund balance. We don't want to be in that problem situation as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Agenda item 9. The initial version of this year's budget is based on assumptions presented in November and the budget reconciliation plan approved by the board earlier in May, and is being presented here by Mr. Vogt.
Thank you so much. So this is one of the first steps in our budget for this year. We adopt an initial budget in May or June for a couple of reasons. It's good fiscal practice. But the other reason is that it gives us the authority to start paying the bills that we incur beginning July 1 before our official budget is passed in October. So our fiscal year is a little strange where it begins in July, but we don't pass our official budget until October. This gives us the ability to kind of move forward through those first couple of months. This is our best guess at the budget, but we know that this will change. A lot of these numbers on here. The state budget is still up in the air in terms of education funding, so we don't know that yet, but a number of things on here will change. This is the calendar where we are today, Committee of the Whole, approval of the initial budget. Pretty much all the steps that we go through with the board are laid out here, along with the final budget adoption at the end of October. So, basis of the budget, we've gone through this a number of times. Expenses of wage salary increases of 1.5% are factored in. Health insurance premiums will go up on average 7%. We are moving third-party administrators from Aspirus Health to UMR, and we are moving from 3 health insurance plans to 2. Most non-personnel expenses are assumed to remain flat or increase a little bit. Department budgets have been decreased by 3% as part of the overall budget balancing process. Increase of revenue limit of $325 per pupil is factored in, and the special education reimbursement rate is budgeted to remain the same at approximately 33%. We are getting less than that. We're getting somewhere between 30 and 31%. That is one thing that Trollop's point from earlier, if that were changed, that could make our budget significantly better, a better picture for our budget. So these are some of the things that will change. Pupil counts will come in September along with equalized values. The voucher program costs, we won't know those till later in the year, and we don't currently project tax levy and mill rates at this time. So these are the initial budgets by fund. Would you like me to read the expenses and revenues for these?
Go ahead.
Sounds great. So Fund 10, that's our operating fund. In expenses, $116,817,568. And in revenues, $116,794,085. That is, again, a very small deficit budget. In previous years, we've adopted much larger deficit budgets for the exact reason that Lance outlined. That had worked out well for the district for a number of years. In these last couple of years, it has not worked out as well for the district, due in very large part to our extreme health insurance cost. So, Fund 27, that is our special education fund. In expenses, $20,345,096, and in revenues, the exact same amount. It's important to note that $11,795,035 is the budget amount to transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27 to make sure that that fund balances. Fund 38 is one of our debt repayment funds. $1,156,035 in expense, $1,176,257 in revenue, including a very small transfer from Fund 10. Fund 39, that is our other debt repayment fund. That's where we're paying off our capital referendum. This number is the exact same as last year. So $22,275,000 in both expense and revenue. That number could change slightly, but that's what we're projecting as of right now. Fund 50 is our nutrition services fund. In expenses, $5,331,270. In revenue, $5,139,500. And then Fund 80 is our community service fund. There's been a lot of community service fund discussion so far this year. Remember, the board just approved moving middle school athletic funding into Fund 80. So you'll see an increase of $300,000 in that fund for a total of $1,092,200 in both expense and revenue.
Let me just add, there was a reason why I wanted you to read those, because for people that are watching on video, they need to be able to hear this and hear where we are at this point in time. So I think it's very important that they wasn't challenging your...
You're just so much better at it.
Okay, any questions? Board members, go ahead.
I would really like to see, we're offering a 1.5% raise to some of our folks, which just kills me to say that. But I would sure like to know exactly how that impacts them, because we're turning around and saying we're going to increase your health insurance by 7%, what that is going to do to their paychecks. And I'd like to see it over the years, because we're giving a raise, but it's really because it's like moving the back peg in cribbage. We really aren't giving a raise. We're helping soften the decrease in buying power.
And to that point, this will be the third year in a row that we've given a raise below CPI. So,
good point. Other questions, any comments? If not, I'm going to be seeking a motion to recommend to the full board of the preliminary budgets as presented in order to proceed with the 2025-26 expenditures committed to before final budgets are approved. Okay, follow-up questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstention identified, and motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10. Ms. Beersdorf and Mr. Foster will present the suggested changes to the athletic activities code at this time. I turn it over to the two of you, and welcome.
Thank you for having us. So first off, we're missing a couple tonight. Mark Beversdorf and Luann LaRue also were very vital in this process, and they both have middle school commitments tonight with track meets and other activities, so you're stuck with us. So one of the things we want to talk about tonight is the process and how we got to the document that's in front of you there. About this time every year, or leading into this time every year, we usually bring some review, revision type things to the activity code of things we've experienced over the course of the year. When we did that last year, we kind of recognized that it had been a long time since we had done a fully inclusive review. So at this time last year, we did not bring any review or revision forward with the idea that we would do this review process this year. So this started way back in September. And we got together, and it was the 4 athletic directors, the 4 principals, Dr. Colwell, the director of secondary education, Mr. Uding was part of it, as well as Mr. Bushman. And we kind of talked about what this process should look like, because it had been quite a while since we've done it. Actually, the last time we did it was in the 2011-2012 school year, is when we did that comprehensive review. So through that group, we met several times, maybe almost a half a dozen, to kind of think about what a committee would look like that we could put together and review that, and kind of started talking about what are the big items. Obviously, that committee can steer us in other directions, but instead of looking at it from top to bottom, what are the big areas that we think that we need to get our eyes on? So what that group came up with was that we wanted that committee should include, and then did end up being included, were high school and middle school parents, high school students, high school and middle school coaches, high school and middle school advisors, the 4 athletic directors, the principals, the 4 principals, as well as the director of secondary ed and the assistant superintendent, and Mr. Uding. That group got together and met 3 separate times with a very specific plan in place of what we would be discussing each night, and then kind of coming back the next one and having done some legwork in between the meetings and review what we had already done and kind of hit those new topics. One of the things we did in order to kind of make the process go more smoothly is we collected the activity codes from all of the other schools in our conference, as well as from Eau Claire, which we thought was a nice one because they are also a multi-high school, the same situation as we have. And lacrosse, yes, we had lacrosses as well. So basically, we got the group together, and within these groups, we kind of did topics each of our meetings, what we would discuss and do. And in those meetings, kind of introduced the topics, and then we had assigned, we broke off into subgroups that were very mixed, so they had students and coaches and advisors, and mixed up all the 4 different schools, east side, west side, together. They went through those topics in those 4 subgroups, discussed the topic. We came back to talk about it as a large group, asked if there was any more information they needed before we could make decisions, and kind of repeated that process until we got to the end. Any questions on the process? Okay. So the big topics that you will see in red tonight as you look at this, or kind of what we hit on, was the first thing, if you remember, we came back, and I don't even remember the month, but it was maybe early winter, late fall. And the first thing we did was ask the district's attorney to kind of review the document for, was there any legal language, there are things that have changed over time that should be added, and he made some revisions. And so that was the document that we used to start this process, that we had asked your permission to do that. But the big topics that we kind of tackled or touched on, the first one was combining the middle school and high school activity codes. Prior to this, those were 2 separate documents. So that was kind of an underlying theme. You'll notice that what we decided to do was combine them. So there's quite a few footnotes in there about some things that apply to middle school but don't apply to high school, or vice versa. One of the biggest things, the heavy language early, all that red on the first 2 or 3, 4 pages, is we divided our athletics, our competitive clubs and activities, and just our clubs, and as well as our co-curriculars, into 5 different subgroups. One of the challenges we've had in the past, I'll speak to my 3 years as an activities director, a code violation occurs. This student is involved in athletics, they're involved in clubs and activities. When the violation occurs, they're currently in a club or activity, but their sports or athletic season isn't until the spring. This happens, so we've kind of, the waters were kind of muddy as far as when does that violation get served, in which area, club activity. So full disclosure, we basically stole these categories from Wisconsin Rapids. This is how they have their activity code set up at the beginning like this. And then we kind of review and revise the language to it and kind of input our athletics clubs and activities from the 4 different schools to fit these areas. The first category you'll notice is just straightforward, our athletics. The second one is our clubs and activities that do engage in competition. So you'll see DECA, FFA, HOSA, which is our future teacher student organization, robotics, all those different ones that go out and compete. We put those. The next category is leadership and public recognition. We kind of split some of our clubs in that with the idea that if you are a leader, an officer in a club, you kind of are to a little higher standard than if you're just a member that shows up. Section 4 is kind of, we put our music and drama, but those co-curricular. So some of those things are mandatory as part of their classes, as well as some of our drama stuff that is extra. And then Section 5 is just kind of our clubs and activities in those areas. Any questions on that specific section, or how we got to that, or why we chose what? We will continue, if approved, we will continue the process of reviewing these each year and bringing this to you guys, and kind of if there are revisions. And I would say this is probably an area that we will kind of learn as we go and say, this really should be here, and maybe move some pieces around. But that's kind of our jumping off point. We did consult the teachers as well as the advisors and the coaches in these areas and get some input where, knowing what the categories were, where they thought they should go.
I'm sure we've missed a couple on there too, but it's an extensive list at this point.
Yeah.
But
Just a minute, Ms. Rush.
I have a bone to pick.
Yeah.
Curling should be under sports.
So basically what the first one is if you go back up to the first category,
WIA.
those are the WIAA sanctioned sports.
And we don't want curling.
So that, you don't want all those rules that go along with it. So that's the only difference between the two and how they got there. And cheer, that's the reason cheer, because if you look at like our school district's coaches, curling, alpine skiing, and cheer are listed under our athletics as opposed to Schedule B, where the majority of our clubs and activities are. So if there's no other questions on that, so we combined the two, we talked about those. Another area that we thought our code had not kept up with was social media. So we have the social media clause that, and very specifically outlines some. This is an area, you just went past it, I think, Cassie, right? Go up a little more, right there, number 8. This is one from code to code. When you look at them, some have almost a whole page on all the different things that could happen within social media and the bullying, harassment, discrimination, all those things. Some of them have major infractions, minor infractions. Ironically, it was just watched after school today in this room a presentation on Title IX and harassment and bullying and how these things kind of fit in there. One of the questions we always have in schools is, how do we address it when it happens that Saturday night at midnight? One kid's sitting in their house, the other kid's sitting in their house, and these things go, but then it spills over into the classroom on Monday or into the commons on Monday. So we hope we addressed it. This is obviously another area where social media will continue to evolve, and we will probably kind of come back and maybe tweak this area from year to year. The next area we wanted to discuss, because we get a little, not pushback, but questions on this, is the timeline of signing and the fresh start of the activity code. So, well, I signed it last year, but I didn't go out for football this year, and I got a violation this summer, but I haven't signed it yet this year because I'm playing basketball but didn't play a fall sport, so I'm not really under it. So the new language very much states that When you enter middle school and you sign it for the first time, you are under the activity code throughout your time in middle school. We may ask you to re-sign it every year in that registration paperwork, but that's only because we do review and revisions. But once you sign it once, the expectation is that you're on it through your middle school career, and then that starts over again in high school. As soon as you sign it one time, you are under that code for the entirety of your high school career. The other thing we looked at is if, when it comes to first offense, second offense, third offense, same thing. When you're in middle school, you have those offenses. When you get to high school, it is a fresh start in regards to those, as well as that academic piece. So in high school, if I get a fourth quarter F, I'm ineligible for the fall. If I'm an eighth grader and I have a fourth quarter F, that does not follow you to high school at this point, or the way the revisions are reflected. The next really big one that the group spent a lot of time on is the character clause. Just about every code we looked at has some version of this clause. Ours has not. I know it's my understanding from the veterans on this committee who were on it in 2011, 2012, like Mr. Steckbauer, Dr. Phelps, were you on it in 11 and 12? So I think Mr. Steckbauer was the only one at that time. They reviewed at that time and chose not to add one of those. So he actually gave some good insight into that. But this group thought that it was time for us to add this to our code. So that's the language specifically that we've added in regards to a character clause. The next one is Esprit, and I'm going to let Darcy talk about that.
Sure. Esprit is if kids get a code that is alcohol, tobacco related, they are referred to to a counseling program or an AODA assessment. We have an opportunity in our schools, because we have trained people, to provide that at no cost, rather than to expect that they can go out into the community and get that and have to pay for it. Currently I have some students that are doing this. It's working well, but that wasn't in here, and it's just one more opportunity for them to get what it tells them they have to get, but within our school systems. So we have a number of people at both schools, actually, at both high schools, that are trained in that. We did talk a little bit about middle school and how that was going to work at the middle school. And knowing that we have trained people at the high school, we figured we could assist with that if needed with our high school people that are trained. If we had to get somebody at the middle school trained, that would be something we could look into doing too.
I believe it's our school social workers and members of our guidance department.
For sure,
in
yep.
both schools.
Yes, it is.
And then the one last thing we looked at and talked about was changing the, I guess, for lack of a better term, the severity of the first offense. The way our current activity code reads, it is 25%, and we are looking to change that to 20%, with the idea that the second offense would still be 50%, but when we looked at 20%, and the percentages and the number of games that are played in seasons, that 20%, and there is no 2.5 games. So if you've missed 2.5, you missed 3. Like that's, and we thought when we looked at the percentages, this gave the opportunity to miss fewer. And I don't think the intent is for them to serve less of a consequence, but what is our purpose in high school-based athletics and clubs and activities? And that is for them to be educated. And that this isn't, we're not looking at penalty or to make their lives miserable. We want them to learn from it, and we think that 20% allows them the opportunity to learn from that mistake, just as well as 25% did. And I think that puts us more in a line with what the other members in our conference are doing as well.
Questions?
I've been thinking about the list of things, and I'm just trying to figure out how it would fit in there. Inappropriate photos, because it could fall under bullying or harassment if somebody else does it, but we have kids that do it themselves, that would put an inappropriate photo out in the everlasting internet. And I was wondering if that would fit in that list somehow.
I think depending on where it went and what happened with it, when we talk about it going out, I mean, if it comes back to our attention that it's causing a disruption and what the purpose and intent, we would certainly review that. Anybody who's new to our activity code, if you didn't read through the whole thing, we do still very much have an activity code council that is made up of both principals, both athletic directors, and then a coach or advisor from each school. And I think that would be a case where we would bring that to that council, and we'd kind of go through that with a fine tooth comb and kind of determine the.
So that would be your appeal process?
Nope, that's the actual process. So if there's a photo of somebody drinking, we automatically, that gets brought to our attention, that goes to the activity code. So anytime, anything like if a student gets caught vaping during the day, we bring that activity code council together. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's virtual, and we just do a meeting. Oftentimes, it's in the morning before school. The 6 of us jump on and have those meetings. Most of them are very, very simple. It's this kid got caught with a vape, it was on their person, they admitted doing it. This is the thing, we do the referral, and this is the consequence, pretty cut and dry.
I was thinking more of a picture that a girl might send her boyfriend.
Right.
Well, and the age of the subject matters there too, which doesn't have to be spelled out here, but, so if there's any kids listening,
Well, that's why I was thinking if it was listed there.
of an underage person, you have child pornography on your device.
And even if you took it
If you have
yourself.
sent one,
So-
you have distributed child pornography, and you are guilty of a crime, and so you have problems even bigger than this activity violation.
And anytime anything like that has ever happened, one of our first calls is to our, walk down the hall, and we involve our SRO in that, and they kind of have the expertise in that. But when those would certainly go in front of the activity code council, whether it's a picture of themselves, it might be a picture of 2 people together. Those are, when, it's kind of nice when we get together with activities directors, we talk about, what'd you have, what do you got this month? And the things that are forever changing, the cell phones are going to be the end of a lot of people, and social media is kind of the downfall of a lot of.
Well, I think it's very important to understand that, what you're talking about is sexting. And sexting is creating, as you put it so eloquently, from a legal point of view, it is creating pornography, and it is pornography on a person's phone. And so people need to be aware of that, and I would hope that we'd be taking care of that immediately.
Absolutely, and as soon as our SRO gets involved, if a ticket is issued to anybody in that is a different level, or that's in the code of conduct. That's not a change we're making, that already exists in there, whatever the charge is. If at any point in time you are charged with a felony, the activity code becomes moot until you've paid your debt to society, whatever that means. Even if there's a charge out there and it hasn't gone to court, we don't even do an activity code violation because they are out of athletics and activities until that works its way through the court system. And that, if it's a misdemeanor, that falls underneath our code of conduct, and the committee would meet, and there would be a violation for that as well.
Comments on this side?
Comment and 2 questions. I'm really glad that the social media piece made it in there, as the same with the character clause. I do have a question about the character clause. Is it infinite get out of jail at halfway freeze? Just 1. Okay, excellent. And then my second question is, based on the changes that we're about to make in terms of opening up middle school sports, what does that do with this, if anything?
Oh, you mean because of Fund 80, so a student from outside?
Because so you could have a non-student.
They're going to participate in our athletics, they would be asked to sign the activity code. So
and the
they would follow our
expectation is they
rules.
would be treated as a student.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good question.
My comment is, it looks like you spent a lot of time in this, and I did read about 3/4 of it at least, so I thought it was very good. I had a question about curling too, and then I realized how you had broken things down, and it all makes sense, and appreciate the work on it.
You make those curlers mad.
If you stack up their state championships, they are leading the way in our school district for a long, long time. So.
My oldest had.
There's a lot of truth in that with the
Yes.
court. I have a question.
Yeah.
Pertaining, having done your job for 11 years, I look at this and I'm thinking drama. I was at a school that was a very sound athletic school and theatrical school. And I noticed the drama club, if we're looking at that, is on category 5. And everybody talks about the fact that what if the lead in the play gets caught doing something? How come it's not as severe as it would be for the person in athletics? And we had to bang that out. And I sometimes look at that and I wonder, are we doing the same here?
Well, I will tell you this, that has been an ongoing concern of ours leading up to this process. And drama bounced back and forth between about 3 categories throughout this process many times. One of the biggest issues is what you brought up, is what happens if it's the lead, that we don't have the luxury, I don't think, as some of these big productions outside, to have an understudy at every different thing. So if the lead, or even a prominent role, or even a lesser role, gets, well, even if it's academic ineligibility, the day before or whatever, how does that impact the rest of the students? So I think, to answer your question, we kind of erred on that side of it. But it's definitely in that category where the advisor, so our director and the administration of the school, kind of have that conversation, what it looks like. Nothing is written down, but I think one of the things that we discussed as a larger group, and even in some of our smaller groups, is if that were to happen, is the consequence that person is not allowed in the next performance. Like, it doesn't impact the students in this performance. The show must go on, the show does go on, but is that student not allowed to be part of the next performance or whatever that might be? And those are discussions.
I'm kind of moving back and forth because I understand that whole argument in that.
Yep.
But we ended up, because of the fact that that is such an important position, it's like your quarterback.
Yep.
We did deal with them. And we did always have a second backup in order to take care of that. And there were some big productions that didn't have the number 1, but had the number 2. The person may not want to go out for the next play on their own volition. So then how do they suffer? Because they have to suffer, and I hate to say it that way, suffer a penalty. But you are penalized not only in athletics, but you're also penalized in the fine arts as well. Those are separate areas. So they're being penalized twice if they're a multiple sport, multiple individual that is a 3A type of student. I understand and I read the whole thing as well, because it always is something that fascinates me. And what's the equality and what's fair?
Why would it be different? Why would the lead in a play, you might think, oh, but now the play isn't going to be the same thing, or we've only got 2 performances. How is that different than, the star quarterback in the state the state playoff game? Your team gets knocked out, the whole season's done because of that, because of the timing of it.
And
how is it different?
I think what I would say this is, you can make the argument either way, and I think that's kind of what we're asking you guys to do. If you want us to move it into a different one, we will certainly do that. So it's kind of, I guess at this point, it is your decision to make. I think when we had the discussion about it, we thought more along the lines of, and your example's good, but we thought more along the lines of, so if I get busted drinking in the summertime, or whatever the violation might be. If an athlete is in soccer and has the opportunity to play 22 soccer games, and they miss 25% of those, they're missing 3 games. If it happens and they're in the play, there's only 3 performances. Those are the only ones, and we kind of weighed, like you said, against the rest of the cast in that regard. But we're completely open to it. We were, like I said, it bounced around between 3 or 4 different categories. So if you guys would like it somewhere different, we are happy to put it wherever you'd like it.
Well, I think the 2 of us are talking about the same thing, and the fact that, and the 3 of us are talking about the fact that, a person needs to think before they go through with something like that. And understand that you're not only letting yourself down, but you're letting your whole team down. You're letting everybody in the theatrical performance down. And the bottom line is, I don't see the difference. We ended up not seeing the difference. That lead did suffer like the number one quarterback. And it was a process that had to be implemented. People need to know that. I just think it's the right thing to do, because people will come back and ask, well, how come you're not treating that person like you would treat the number one running back? And we keep on using that example, or the point guard, or the goalie in hockey. They all suffer the consequence, and they're all very important to team efforts.
Better make a curling reference quick, or somebody's going to get mad.
I do want to point out, it's not in category 5, it's in category 4.
Right.
Drama club is in category 5, not all plays, musicals, all concerts, all
Right.
orchestra, all choir, all pep band, all of those arts things are all under category 4.
So those would be treated.
Nope, all students participating in these respective activities will adhere to school board policies, school rules, and classroom rules. All eligibility determinations will be made by the advisor with the building administration. So that's not a straight-up activity code violation, and they would lose 20%.
Not necessarily, but
Correct.
that would be decided
Could
by
be.
the building principal and potentially the director and potentially the activities director. And I think that they're two different things, right? Drama club is different. Those are kids that are just involved in the club, not necessarily the performances. They're two different things. But to your point, there isn't something super specific that says exactly what happens. It will be up to the discretion of the advisor and the building administration for category 4.
Puts a lot of pressure on them, because it's very vague.
Was there,
So generally, you've been through this before with me on different topics, and usually my focus is on the process. And if I agree with the process, I'll give you my opinion, but pretty much go with the process. And that's kind of what I'm leaning towards right now.
Right.
I feel like if I was part of this process, I would have been arguing in favor of having these treated the same as the sports, because why would you want to, as an administrator, have to make that decision, first of all? And how are you going to keep it consistent between schools, between years? Well, last year, the lead and the play didn't have to miss, and this year did, that kind of thing. And I think if you let somebody off on this type of activity, then the next year it's going to be, well, I know it says here's the violation, but if it happens during the summer, you just missed 2 games at the start of the season, it's not a big deal, but this happened during the playoffs. It's going to hurt the whole team, not just me. And I just think it's such a slippery slope. But I didn't take part in all that process. So there might have been all kinds of discussions like that where you came to a different conclusion that makes perfect sense, and I just wasn't there to hear all of it. It's just my thoughts having looked at this for a week.
And I don't know if there is one that makes perfect sense. I think that's kind of how we got to this.
I agree with Lynn completely, that at the end of the day, I trust your process and I'm going to support that. I do want to say I really like the language under category 3 that you have, because it says, students who violate stated rules are subject to removal from the activity as deemed appropriate by the activity advisor and or the building administrator. So it's almost the same language as category 4, but it gives them in writing the option to remove them from the activity in a much more clear way. Whereas category 4 kind of says they can do whatever they decide. I'm wondering if maybe the middle ground here is that category 3 and category 4 could be switched.
Same language.
Is there a reason that category 4 activities, because they all seem to be the arts related, music, orchestra, theater, to me it makes sense that they fall under this same language as these high level clubs, which is removal is on the table. It's not guaranteed, but it's absolutely written and on the table. And I don't think it takes the power away from building administrators or advisors. It just makes it a little more clear that it's severe.
I'm just going to continue to add my 2 cents on this one, because I've been in that situation. And the fact is that, I was real flexible at one time, and then I became really tight on the other because of this argument that comes up. Category 4, 5, 3, 4 1, 2, 3. I mean, you can get all the categories you want, but I, as an administrator then, not just as the AD, but as an administrator having to make that decision, like to your point, 1 year, this guy, this person, this actress was eliminated. The following year, now the actor is not eliminated.
Right.
Now you're in that position where now you're taking on history and all of that. That slippery slope becomes very slippery. And I think that's when I started looking at the fact that you almost have to be black and white. But that's, again, to my point where I'm not going to rewrite the whole book that you guys have worked on for how long? Quite a while.
And my concern with the being black and white is then you almost have to have understudies.
Yeah.
Now, who's going to be trying out for an understudy every year if they never get to perform? So do you do one of the things where the understudies get to perform? Well, then the main guy's losing out one anyway, and he hasn't done anything wrong. It's a slippery slope that way. And maybe 1 year, if we don't go black and white, maybe 1 year the person gets benched because they have an understudy, but the next year there's no understudy, so you have to put them on.
For in a good theater program, will have one that is capable of doing more than one position, one character. And that one person that's capable of doing that might have two parts, and the one part's never used. That's how the understudies have been worked on in good theater schools, and I would hope to have good theater schools here in the Wausau School District. Anyway, I think we beat that horse to death, possibly.
I think it happens that often.
All right, so with that, I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the revised athletics and activities code.
Second.
Okay, any follow-up questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your work on all of this. This is not something that, don't feel like you're put into a corner or anything like that.
Not at all.
I mean, we're trying to do the right thing for students, for families, for our community, and this is all very important. As we talk about the AAA student, you've got academics first.
Well,
you got athletics and you got fine arts, and you have to look at all three.
And the process was a lot of work, but it was great to bring the parents and the advisors and one of the things that we really needed to do was kind of figure out what the athletics and the activities and the clubs and the co-curriculars kind of look like. So those are good conversations, and there was a lot of going back and forth too. There were no rubber stamps throughout the process.
It was just good discussion, good points of view from the wide scope of people that we had, so.
Well done. Appreciate all the work that you put into that. Thank you. All right, agenda item number 11. Mr. Williams, Michelle, Ms. Piet, and Mr. Ziegler will present the use and the need to update the district's iPad fleet. An important tool to talk about.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you how we are using technology within our classrooms. We're going to start off with a discussion of that first, and then we'll move on to our current state. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Well, thank you very much. We'll quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Melissa Piet, and I'm an Assistive and Instructional Technology Integration Specialist here in the Wausau School District. This is my 20th year in the district and 26th year in education.
My name is Stephanie Ziegler. I'm an instructional technology teacher as well. I've been in the role for 1 month and have been in the district 18 years. Was a great teacher for a lot of years.
And so we're very excited to share a little bit about the great work that's happening here in the school district tonight with you. Before we begin, though, we want to introduce our entire team. Our team consists of 4 integration specialists. So Kirsten, Steph, Aaron, and myself collectively have over 65 years of teaching experience, together with Ralph, our director, and Jeremy, our accessibility advocate. We really work to support our staff and our students in their abilities to navigate that digital workflow in the classroom every day. Foundationally, we want to share a little bit about kind of our beliefs. We really believe that great learning happens when our kids are engaged, when they're making those personal connections to that learning. We truly believe in, embracing the failures that happen along the way and just celebrating that success. Our goal in our work is to truly prepare our students to be competitive 21st century graduates. Now, in reality, in kindergarten through 5th grade, we're truly building that foundation with our learners. We're helping our learners to create. We're helping our learners to critically think and explore bigger questions. We want them to communicate some of their insights and their thoughts and collaborate with their peers with a variety of tools, both traditional tools and digital tools. Our education department and our instructional technology departments here in our district leverage iPad as a partner in our ability to support the growth in our learners kindergarten through 5th grade. We want to dig in tonight with you on how we use that iPad to ensure students can access our district and state curricular resources. We want to share a little bit with you about how it encourages that active engagement and creative expression with our students and truly helps us foster that sense of access, engagement, and belonging, which we know is so critical. We want to highlight a little bit on how we strive to create those learners who are leaders in their own learning, learners who develop foundational lifelong technology skills as they move through the grade levels here in the district, and we really believe that the iPad is pivotal in that work. We also want to be very clear about how iPad is used in our elementary classrooms. This is not about passive consumption-based screen time. This is really about active engagement in learning. And let me explain a little bit about what I mean. Imagine a young learner not just watching or reading a story, but creating their own animated fairy tale. Or a 3rd grader who's not just reading about traveling to the moon, but experiencing that space travel using an augmented reality app to launch the Apollo 11 from their desk and finally land the Eagle on the moon. Students in the district are using iPad to code, to illustrate, to record their thoughts and solve problems collaboratively, and truly express themselves in ways that weren't possible before. Now, our district also supports and encourages that traditional learning experiences, but a considerable portion of our district and state recommended resources are only available in a digital format. So the visual that you're looking at on the screen currently really illustrates that distribution of our curricular resources across the grade bands.
And it's critical that the functionality of the iPad is part of each and every classroom, because that's how our students are engaging in the curriculum. No longer do we only have paper and pencil and textbook and workbooks. Many of our curriculums that we buy and the resources that we buy these days are only available through digital access, and some of the functions within that are only available not only for teachers but for students through digital access. You will see up there our newly adopted FOSS science curriculum that we adopted last year for K-5. Really great reading and wit and wisdom are part of our Act 20 and science of reading adoptions as part of that element. We have a plethora of testing devices that are only accessible through that electronic platform, such as our Ames Web Screener, which is required by Act 20, as well as our EMLSS systems, and then the forward test. So the functionality of the iPads in terms of how students are even engaging in our curricular resources occurs through this tool.
Aligned to our core curriculum, our dedicated teachers and our team we're really constantly working to craft resources and experiences that make that learning truly active and engaging for our students. Now, in addition to that student side of learning, it's also important that we share and highlight the teaching side with iPad. For example, Apple Classroom is a free teacher app, and this helps our teachers transition students from one app to the next. It helps our teachers direct students' attention, all while protecting that teaching time. It can also quickly allow a teacher to pull an iPad up onto their interactive TV display and really helps to facilitate that classroom discourse. With iPad and Apple Classroom app, the teacher really has the ability to navigate around the classroom and create that thriving learning environment, all while helping to build our students' abilities to regulate their own digital learning as well, which we think is very important. Now, because iPad is so highly customizable, it really serves as a dedicated learning tool, and that it's a true partner in learning. So as you're looking at the images and the videos on this slide, you can see that our learners use the iPad as kind of one of their, like we like to call it, tools for learning in the classroom. And so depending on the task that they set out to accomplish, our learners often pair iPad with very traditional means of engagement. Now, behind this, we also have our learning management system, Canvas, and that serves as a powerful hub for really sharing and accessing some of the experiences that our team strives to create here in the district. Currently in Canvas, we have over 3,100 connected families that are elementary level. The transition from Canvas as a simple communication tool, where we started out using announcements and inbox, is really kind of moving into becoming more of a hub of resources in our elementary classrooms. And it's really serving as kind of a growing importance in that connection from home to school. And we really feel like this digital ecosystem allows us to truly meet our learners where they are at, fostering a lot of individual preferences in how they engage with their learning, and truly empower our kids to learn how to express themselves in ways that make the most sense for them. Creativity is not just about artistic expression. It's really an approach to that deeper engagement and learning, and it moves kind of beyond the typical recall to allow students to truly express themselves and take tasks beyond tradition. Now, in the upper right-hand corner on the screen, you'll see a living timeline created in the Keynote app, and that is the documentation that a student created with her space travel. In the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you see a student's interactive immigration journal documenting their learning as if they were at Ellis Island themselves, and you'll see a student put themselves right in the picture. All of these experiences are aligned with our Wit and Wisdom K-5 ELA curricular resource, and really allow our learners to tackle some of those learning targets through that deeper engagement through creation. It really helps them to dig a little deeper, and they gather a little bit more background knowledge along the way, and really it fosters those high value skills that are really essential for kids in this ever-changing world. Access, engagement, and belonging. We really believe that this is kind of an overarching goal of what we all seek to do, right, in our classrooms and in our district. As educators, though, we often overlook the prevalence of reading and writing challenges. And in fact, I think if we removed educational classifications around disability and language learning, we'd find that print access alone is one of the most common challenges that our learners face, and yet all day long, we ask them to engage with and access and express themselves through print, right? So leveraging some of the free accessibility features such as text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and predictive text more universally allows all of our students access to tools to support that learner autonomy, right, which hits that self-efficacy side of things for students. It helps learning feedback, increasing that learning feedback. It helps with those metacognitive strategies that we know are so critical, and really just helps boost that student sense of self-efficacy. As you look at the images on the screen, you're seeing a young learner in the middle bottom practicing a traditional handwriting task. So she has her handwriting to the right of the iPad screen, and she's actually leveraging Canvas on her iPad with a teacher-created resource to show her the proper formation of the traditional task. You also see students reading grade-level text using dual synchronous highlighting with text-to-speech, so it continues to build their learning momentum. Now, by third grade, and we can pass these out. By third grade, what Steph's passing out is what you're seeing on the screen, and I'll talk a little bit about them in just a moment. But by third grade, learners are expected to be typing 2 or more paragraphs using basic word processing, and they're expected to be editing their own digital writing. Now, among other skills, they're also expected to use technology to organize information and annotate into digital text. This work and experience is truly going to support them as they embark in third grade, their first year of state testing. On the screen and now in front of you, you can see our very own Wausau School District teacher-endorsed technology ICANN statements. These statements are intentionally aligned with our Wisconsin standards for information and technology literacy. If you're not familiar with those standards, they've been around since 2017, and they truly kind of help us prepare our students for a future that we really can't yet imagine. We also think that these help our teachers quite a bit focus on that digital workflow and on a grade level standpoint. And I think it takes a little bit of pressure off of our teachers and helps to narrow down what students should be learning at each grade level and practicing those right skills that they will build on as they go. So for us, these are more than just a list of skills. They're really a roadmap for us to ensure that our students are not just consumers of that technology, but they're truly active creators, collaborators, critical thinkers in this digital world.
Thank you. Now that we've seen how our teachers and students are using iPads in the classrooms, I want to take just a moment to talk about our current fleet. Right now, we are currently using an 8th generation iPad that was released in 2020 by Apple. So we're 3 generations behind. 11 was just released in April of this year, I believe, March. We currently do have, to protect our iPads, Logitech rugged cases with keyboards, so they get that keyboard experience at an early age. Also crayons, and we also have the free built-in accessory tools, or accessibility tools. So some of the challenges that we currently are experiencing is mainly with storage issues. As you noted, there was 32 gigs of storage, but apps keep growing, and as we use more and integrate them into our curriculum, we need more space. So one of the problems that we have is we start running out and we want to put in a new OS upgrade. It sometimes can take us 15 to 40 minutes per iPad in order to complete that task. So when you're talking about a fleet of about 3,800, and you have about a 20% error rate with that, it adds up to quite a bit of time. Maintaining the current iOS is critical for a number of reasons. It's critical for them to be able to use the tools that we are providing them, that we know that they'll work. It's incredibly important to make sure that we're on that to meet state standards for testing. But from my standpoint, and that's from the teacher perspective, but from my standpoint as well, from a security standpoint, if we're not keeping up with that, we're putting ourselves at risk with the data that we do have. So that's another thing to think about. So continuing that challenge, like I mentioned, about 20% of our fleet, or about 800 iPads, have currently had problems when we try to do the iOS upgrade. That's about 100 iPads a building, having less than 4 gigs left to be able to actually do an upgrade that's requiring anywhere between 4 to 9 gigs of space. So we either have to delete some of the applications that they're currently using, delete photos and other personal items that they have on there, and then try to do the upgrade and then restore everything back to the way it was. And it takes a little bit of time in order to do that. Part of our other problem is for our building level technical aids, we don't have one in each building. So if something were to happen like that, we have time to be able to put in the request to say that we're having an issue, and then have them come out to be able to do that. And it adds to the frustration, not only to the student, but also to teachers. So with that, we have 3 potential options we'd like to talk to you about. Those 3 are, we could try to stay the status quo for another year. We could move towards Apple leasing, or go to option 3 with a straight out purchase. So option 1 with the status quo, it would delay us spending about $250,000 this year out of the 25-26 budget. However, as I mentioned, we have some issues in terms of what may happen if we can't get that iOS updated. The amount of cost that we would do with time that we would spend on that is roughly about $10,000. More importantly, we would lose an opportunity. Right now, we can take the current fleet of iPads that we have and that we would want to refresh and sell them. There is a market for them. And it would decrease at about 50% as expected for next year if we wait just 1 year. So even by saving some money today, we're really not saving because we're losing an opportunity. And then you also have the volatility of prices right now. While things seem to have calmed down a little bit with tariffs and things happening, you never know what that may be like, because that was my belief, is a 90-day relief, and after that. So not only from a cost, but also a timing perspective from a tariff issue. So option number 2 is that we did work out with Apple and with another company to buy our fleet. They would give us about $306,000 for our current Generation 8 iPads. We could use that as part of reducing the amount that we would need in order to acquire or refresh our iPads. And then Apple is offering us to amortize over 4 years the remaining part of that purchase, so about $250,000, and they're doing it at a 0% interest. The funding sources that we've had for this to allocate, or our technology budget does have the ability to take on that and the increase from the last lease that we just ended, or we could use the money from the 2022 referendum that was designated for technology use. So with doing this, we would update our fleet, our security would be taken care of, the resource compatibility would be resolved, we would be able to have enough space to do those iOS updates, and it would increase the amount of time for our IT staff to be able to go out and help solve other issues. The one con would be that you are entering into a 4-year commitment in order to have that lease. Now, we did add another option here. We again have the $306,000 that we could do. We could take the funds from that 2022 referendum, which was about $3.825 million that was set aside for classroom technology, displays, fiber wiring, and location, which about only $790,000 has been used to date. And we could outright purchase our iPads. We do at that point have, we're giving away somewhat free money with the 0% interest that Apple is offering us. It's really the only con that I could think of when coming up with that option. Okay, one other thing to note with this is that we would want to purchase iPad cases. Our existing cases are not compatible with the new fleet. It's just a little bit different size, so we would need to go out and purchase those. And these are really, when you're thinking about iPads and technology in the hands of our students, we want to try to protect it as best we can, and these cases have proven to do pretty well for that. The other thing is that we want to make sure that the students have a keyboard and that are using the native keyboard that's on the screen with the iPads so that they're used to it by the time they need to do their state testing. And again, we would want to ask to use the funds that were designated for technology in the referendum to do that purpose up to $400,000, roughly about $100 a case. With that, our recommendation would be is to acquire the iPads with either option 2 or option 3. And at this point, open it up to any questions that you might have.
Got a question, or a couple comments. First, on the presentation, thanks for explaining, how they're used. And I think a lot of times when people talk about not wanting tablets in the classroom, it's because they don't understand how they're used. They might think of them how they use them themselves, which is not how they should. I mean, it's a device. It's a tool. A book is a tool. If you use it as a doorstop, it doesn't do very much. An iPad's a tool. If you don't use it correctly, then it's not the tool's fault. On the recommendations, one of the things that we've heard, or that I've heard at least many times, is why don't we use some of the 2022 money to help our budget? Like, why don't we, stop building, putting in the turf field or making the renovations and use that on the budget? And we can't. We know that, but the public doesn't. This is one small part of it where we actually can do that, where we can have the benefit of solving this and also helping the budget. Is there a different technology priority that you would place ahead of it? Like, why wouldn't we use the $3+ million that we have designated for technology from the 2022 referendum on this? Is there some different technology thing that you think is more important than this right now?
No, I would say that looking at the fleet and knowing what the risks are, this is our number one priority from a technology standpoint. We do have some other infrastructure needs that we might need to look at in a year or so, but that's a little bit down the road. This has immediate impact, and it has a large impact on our students and our teachers.
I have a follow-up on Lance's, because I sort of wrote down, what was figured in 22 and what aren't we doing, I guess? Do you know that?
Ralph, you want me to?
Sure. Thank you, Josh.
As a reference point, because if we're buying iPads instead of doing something else, what was that something else that was identified in 22?
Yeah, so.
Yes.
Thank you. What was called out in the referendum language was exactly what Ralph said, was for classroom devices and things like that. So no specific thing was identified that we wouldn't be doing by doing this.
Okay.
It was set aside for purposes exactly like this.
But some feedback on it. Historically, devices like this are one of the things that we really need help with outside of our normal budget. So that's why you described it. Whether it's these or Chromebooks in the older for the older ages, we used to have like all the smartboard stuff and and so.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm just asking if there was something identified.
A great question.
And the other side of it is that the reality is, no matter how much I would want to go back to physical books and make the kids carry them around, right? Like we had to, is that
What
this.
year is this?
Yeah. Well, and that's
They still
the
do.
point,
They still carry them around.
Yeah, and some classes do have books, but for the most part, this is our books, right?
Mhm.
And we just have to accept that this is the books, and we're replacing our books instead of, they're just, they're not green. They're not environmental because they're not paper, but these are our books. So, the other question on the security side is how, by going to the 11, how, are we increasing or reducing our vulnerability in the digital attack world by going to the 11s?
Great question. The 11 Gen has 128 gigs of space, so we're quadrupling our ability. So it's not gaining us additional security features, right, with the new generation, but what it is doing is it allowing us to effectively update the iPads when new releases come out. And the risk is with the old generation, if we're not able to do that and we have to run for the rest of the year not having the iOS upgrade, then we're at risk.
And the iOS matters mostly for the security risk, where malware could get in, right?
It's one of the key factors.
We have 3,800 points of attack.
Yep.
Just with our iPads.
Correct.
Okay.
So yes, with that, it is always recommended that you keep up to date as best you can. Now, one of the things that I will say is when we do the update for the release, we wait a little bit, we test it out. Unless there's what's called a zero-day security threat. The zero-day security threat is one that you want to do as quickly as you possibly can. That means you're at high risk. But if you're doing a normal upgrade, you've got some time, you do your testing, you allow others to do testing as well so they get the bleeding edge, and then you go and move forward after you've done that. So that helps reduce the overall risk of technology.
On one of the slides, you had something about Wi-Fi connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
With these, do they essentially draw more bandwidth, so we need to upgrade like our hotspots in each room?
Yeah, it's again more of a idea of the OS being upgraded. So OS upgrades aren't just for security. There are new features, there are enhancements that come out throughout. So it's not just security. And so sometimes if you're on the backwards end of it, you have issues connecting with Wi-Fi, especially if you're updating your Wi-Fi environment.
Okay.
Good questions.
So
Go ahead, Sarah.
it would seem to me that we're looking at a question between 2 and 3. So just to talk numbers, assuming that we are comfortable moving forward with utilizing the referendum funds, which I don't see why we wouldn't be, considering that's what they were for. If we purchase them, then we have the option in 2, 3, 4 years to sell them and upgrade again, correct? And kind of create that cycle. Whereas if we lease them in 4 or 5 years when they're obsolete and we're facing the same issue, then we're looking at either another output of sale or lease without a corresponding sale to assist with the price, correct?
Kind of. So one of the things that's interesting, Apple does give us that expectation of what they think the value may be. Now, we're lucky on this instance. When the refresh happened 4 years ago, 8 had been released the year before. That following year, they released 9, so 8 had less value, but you already purchased most of the fleet being 8. So that made for our resale now a little bit lower. If we take advantage of it today and get the new one, our resale in 4 years is going to be higher than it is today because it's going to be 1 year newer.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you another option later on as well. So we still have the ability to sell those. It's just a matter of what's the price going to be.
Wait, so we would still have the ability to sell the ones we leased?
Correct. But we had a lease 4 years ago.
Okay.
So with a part of that lease, we have it for 4 years. After the 4 years, they are ours and we can
Okay, so it's a lease
sell
to
them. It's a
purchase.
lease to purchase.
So based on a lease to purchase or a purchase outright, when you look at doing this every 4 or 5 years, which is the more, in your opinion, fiscally responsible way to go about this, that is the best technology benefit for our students, as well as the best fiscal responsibility for the district?
When you're looking at it that way, you can really have a toss-up. It depends on what you're planning on.
Can I give you one
Sure.
more thing to add to it, if it works? Can we earmark the referendum funds and use it to do the no-interest lease to purchase for the next 4 years so that the money stays in our account and we earn interest and don't pay interest to Apple?
Yes.
Exactly.
Can we keep it that long and do that? Yeah, that's why.
Exactly.
Let him respond.
Exactly what you just said would be my preferred way to do it, for the exact reason you just outlined. I'm waiting to get final confirmation that we can extend those funds for that long, but that would be my preference.
Because it's a significant enough amount of money that if we can commit to it, pass a motion that it's earmarked and it's set for that, and then we keep it in our account earning interest over the next 4 years, I mean.
Yeah, I don't think this is an opinion decision. You look at the numbers.
Right.
Leasing 4 years, purchasing, the value when you sell them, what saves us the most money? And then it's not like, well, I think it's, here's a number, that's better, boom, done.
So my recommendation would be the lease, and then I'll have final word on that before the final.
But covering it completely from the 22 referendum funds. It makes sense to me, too.
That gives us an opportunity to stay on top of our technology that is being used within the pedagogy of our teachers and for our students in their learning process. iOS material, Apple does a very good job. It's a very educational tool that should be used. Now, I've got my own biases, so that kind of came out on that one. I have, when you're talking about keeping up to date with your iPads, I've got a iOS iPad 17 from 2017. Periodically, I take it out of the mothballs and try to play around with it. Can't do much with it anymore. You got to stay on top of that, and that's what technology is. Approximate every 5 years, we have new technology coming up, correct?
4 to 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Because we do want to get to a motion, so what is the preferred motion that we want to have? We've got 2 motions in front of us that one we will choose to go with.
Option 2 with leasing, as long as Josh can come through on that, so that we, because I was thinking the one-time fee, because we have known funds now, seemed to make more sense instead of worrying about it year after year. If we can hold the money, then I'm okay with the leasing.
On this side?
I have comments about pad use in general and question. If that's appropriate.
Ask the general question.
So, just writing tons of stuff as you're going through, could we have a future meeting to bring you back up to discuss iPad use versus crayons, markers, pens, things like that, where art use on actual paper, where kids are using their imagination versus digitally, so actually having that tactile response, learning how to, just in general, a lot of things when you go to a digital world, obviously you can't stop it, but you need to look at different things where in a lot of your photos, what are many kids doing? Hunched over on a device. Tons of kids are experiencing a lot more back issues, posture issues, different things like that, where, we always need to stay up with technology, but then what are you doing to ensure that students are not hurting themselves in the same way, where, are they having stretch breaks? Things like that with pad use. Is there maybe stand-up desks or different things that you can do where technology is always adapting, you can't stop it, but making sure you're always making the right decisions for students, for their health, for their muscular development, because especially when your muscles are growing and you always have that tendency when you're later in life and older, then you're down the road, you're going to have shoulder problems back. And it's a lot more studies now are seeing that. And obviously this is a brand new thing that's happening going full digital, and there isn't tons of research out there. So a lot of people want to say like, oh, these things are great and we use them, but down the road you'll learn like, oh man, if we only would have known. And that's why a lot more health conscious studies and things have been coming out. So I would just like to, if we can, I don't want to take any more time because we're going way over, but those types of discussions, if they could come back and we could talk about the use of them. And then also just one other thing is the addictive nature of, obviously they're not swiping and doing things like that, it's for school, but also in your response when you're learning, if you have short videos or little achievements and things, it's getting that emotional response, and that is an addictive nature. So yes, we go full digital where paper you're just reading, you turn it and use it. Well, a lot of programs will have those incentives where like kids like, oh, I love using this program because it gives me that little achievement. Well, it's actually generating that response where if they were to pick up a normal book and read it, where it's actually, they find it extremely difficult because they're not getting that response and that little emotional pump each time, where you can develop an addictive nature to those types of things. So I think just evaluating a lot of those programs, or in general, and last point is using your imagination. So being able to develop in like, oh, we have a video where you can experience space and things like that. Well, now a kid doesn't need to imagine what space is like because they can just watch a video, see it, and then, well, they're not using their imagination. They're not running around pretending they're a space person going or an astronaut or anything because they can just watch a video on it. So there's all these different roads, and I think obviously you have to adapt with electronics, but let's navigate it the best way possible and always try to look at the future and what we're doing about it. So
I think it would be great to continue to showcase and share different ways that the tools are being used, and I think hopefully you'll see that balance that we really strive for in really engaging our students in those tools, creating with those tools, and finding the balance. So I would love to continue that.
yeah, because I have 2 young kids, and it's really, I'm learning that balance of leveraging the technology, making sure they know and they're up to date with everyone else, but at the same time, go back and try to just, see the benefits of all. So
Greatly do appreciate good art. And we see that all the time at the high schools and the middle schools where they're portraying all of that. So I wouldn't disagree with that at all, but again, we need to be looking forward, as Nick pointed out. The one point I'd like to allude to is one that Corey brought up. We now have a lot of points of attack. I do want to see, or if you can, bring to us showing how we are setting up our security for our technology as well, and those attacks that are happening. And we know they're happening. We know that some of the schools in central Wisconsin have been attacked throughout the summer, the last 2 summers, matter of fact. I would like to have some discussion on security there. Safety and security has been a big thing for the buildings. Well, now we need to have the security for our digital world as well. All right, so what I'm hearing, and I'll put this motion forward, pertaining to the 4-year lease. And let me read that off, and we'll move off of that. I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval to enter into a 4-year lease agreement with Apple for the refresh of 4,000 district iPad funding from allocated technology budget money of funds designated for technology from 2022 referendum, and the approval to use up to $400,000 from the 2022 IT referendum money for the purchase of the 4,000 iPad protective cases. And that would be the motion I'm putting forward.
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions on that with the motion on the table?
Yeah, my question is, do we need to specify about holding those funds if it's found to be acceptable?
I think the motion itself says that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just the question I would have is, what happens if you find out we can't, and they're just gonna bring it back?
I would say we bring it back and then move to purchase.
Purchase outright, okay.
So, and one other thing is that Apple said there is no prepayment penalty on that, so if we find out that it's within a shorter amount of time than we have, we can do that as well.
Okay, you just have to make sure the referendum funds can stay in that account that long, right? Okay.
Now remember that if you can't do that, we don't meet for another 3 weeks. It's not 2 weeks, but 3 weeks till the next time we meet. You're under a deadline.
We are.
So you need to make that decision to move forward. We're telling you to do that. That's what we approve of. but you need to find out.
We would need to sign the lease agreement in order to have the order purchased, for the order to go through and the delivery. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks. So you would be looking at the beginning of July, and it would give us about 5 or 6 weeks to process 4,000 iPads.
Okay.
I should know tomorrow.
Pardon me?
I should know tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good. All right, that deals with the questions. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Greatly appreciate that. I'm seeking a motion to adjourn. Motion carries. Excuse me. Motion's going to carry. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. There you go. All right. I am calling Monday, May 19th special meeting to order. Agenda item 2, approve consent agenda. Appointments, additional staff, replacement staff, contract increases, separations, resignations, contract decreases, terminations, leave of absence, retirements. There is a comment that you wanted to make. Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Now the comment.
We didn't approve it yet.
Okay. I thought you were going to add something at this point in time. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
No, you can't.
This is where you're going to jump in. I'm trying to get them to jump in here, guys. Don't rush it any faster than what it is. Yeah.
Thank you. With the vote on the consent agenda, we have 2 new faces that you guys will see in front of you from time to time. One is John Tomsky. John is currently our associate principal at Wausau West. He does programming. He's also done pupil services. He's accepted the position of director of secondary ed for our team. So we're really excited for John to be up there. He's got some great ideas. He's done a great job in his position, and we welcome him to the leadership team.
Welcome,
so
John.
John.
Welcome.
The second face that's in the audience is Alexandra Libby. Alexandra has accepted the position of associate principal at Wausau West. So we stole her from Merrill. We're really excited for her. She was a counselor, now was an associate principal up there. If you guys are familiar with Raise Your Voice that we have in the district and has taken on a lot of growth in the entire area, Alexandra was really the spearhead behind that at Merrill. She kind of initiated that, took a group of students down to speak in front of legislatures as well. So we're really excited to have her as be part of our team as well. So welcome, Alexandra.
Welcome. Well, I better keep on moving because I can tell that the board is really willing to get moving on this one quickly. So with that, going blah, 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 blah with the presentation we just heard, I'm going to put the motion in front of us, and it is. I'm seeking a motion to approve to enter into a 4-year lease agreement with Apple for the refresh of 4,000 district iPad funding for allocated technology budget money or funds designated for technology from 2022 referendum, and the approval to use up to $400,000 from the 2022 IT referendum money for the purchase of 4,000 iPad protective cases.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everybody. Boy, 2 hours, you guys can't stand anything more than that anymore.